Hello there, and welcome to Warframe Augment buffs part 2, which were just released with update 32, the Veilbreaker. This round of buffs, just like the first round of buffs, is aimed toward some of the less used augments in the game to hopefully make them a little bit better so they will see some use. And let's start off with the one that doesn't really need much explanation, Soul Survivor for Necros. This is a Soul Punch augment, which is Necros' first ability that allows you to revive an ally when you use Soul Punch on them. The change here is that previously this augment would drain all your energy whenever you would revive an ally, and that is no longer the case. It just has a base energy cost of 25. Next up, we have Safeguard Switch for Loki's Teleport. This allows you to teleport switch with an ally, which will grant you and your ally 3 seconds of invulnerability and cleanse both of you of negative status effects. This also works when you teleport switch with an enemy, so you will also be cleansed of negative status effects and you will gain the invulnerability. Plus, the invulnerability period is affected by ability duration, so you can scale it up. So overall, not too bad. Next on the list is Mag's Fracturing Crush, which is an augment for Crush, her fourth ability, which would previously reduce the armor of any enemy hit by 50% and also render them unable to move for 7 seconds. Now the functionality of the augment remains the same, so it still reduces enemy armor and it renders them unable to move for 7 seconds at base, but it now also provides 50% faster casting speed for Crush, so you're effectively getting free natural talent for Crush. Next up, we have Staggering Shield for Messa's Shatter Shield. Now this augment would previously make it so that whenever a bullet would ricochet off of your shield, it would have a 50% chance to stagger the enemy it would hit. Now while this is still the case, it's no longer a set 50% chance. It scales with power strength all the way up to a guaranteed stagger on a ricochet whenever you have 200% power strength or more. And the second one for Mesa is Ballistic Bullseye, which would previously give you stacking status chance as you were charging your ballistic battery. This has now been changed to critical chance instead. Now this is obviously much better, as ballistic battery basically gives you a kill shot. You activate it, you store some of the damage you deal to the enemies, then you activate it again and you get a massive kill shot. It doesn't make a ton of sense for that kill shot to proc status. What does make sense, however, is for that kill shot to crit. And oh boy, crit it will. Next up, we have Ninja's Phytoclastic Flow Augment for Firewalker. This just got straight up buffed. It would previously accumulate 150% of all the damage that Firewalker would do and unleash it for 10 seconds in a straight line. Whereas now it accumulates 250% of all the damage done by Firewalker, and the line you unleash at the very end also has a forced heat proc on it. So not only will you accumulate damage much faster, you will also get a nice forced heat proc at the end. Next up, we have Insatiable for Nidus' Ravenous. This would previously give you a 60% chance to gain an additional mutation whenever you would gain a mutation while standing on Ravenous Infestation. And while this is still the case, the chance to get an additional mutation now scales with power strength to a point where you can actually get multiple mutations at once. If you go to 150% power strength, you are guaranteed a second mutation, and if you go up to 200%, you are guaranteed a third. It's actually kind of crazy how fast you can mutate with this, even if you don't have a ton of power strength. And the second one for Nidus is called Larva Burst, which I keep calling Lava Burst. I guess all those years playing World of Warcraft have scarred my brain a little bit. Now this one has been straight up buffed. It used to do 300 toxin damage per enemy that was held by the larva to all enemies within 5 meters. This has now been changed to 600 toxin damage per enemy held by the larva to all enemies within 8 meters. And while this is going to be nice in lower level missions where this detonation can actually kill something, in high level missions this augment is mostly used just so you can recast larva. But it's still a nice change. Moving on to Nova's Neutron Star, a null star augment. This would previously fire out all your remaining stars to enemies nearby, dealing 120 blast damage on hit with a guaranteed blast status effect to the enemy hit and all enemies within 8 meters. And here the damage has been doubled, so it now does 240 base damage per hit. It's also been changed from blast to heat, so it also force procs heat, and the explosion radius has been doubled as well, so it went from 8 meters to 16 meters. And finally, and this change is actually not all that good, it doubles the base seeking radius of the null stars, because the way it works is you activate it, the null stars shield you, but they seek nearby enemies to hit them, which will consume the null star. The reason that's not good is because null star is usually used defensively, since the null stars give you damage reduction, so you don't really want to fire them out. This augment is kind of similar to Larva Burst, because you don't really use it to fire out the null stars and get a little bit of damage out of them. You use it because it allows you to fire out your remaining null stars and then can recast the ability, giving you full damage reduction again. But anyway, we have a second one for Nova, and that is Antimatter Absorb, which is an augment for antimatter drop. This would previously create a 3-meter sphere around the antimatter drop, which would absorb enemy projectiles and increase the drop's damage at the end. This has now been increased to 5 meters, though the usability of this augment is still a bit meh because the enemies do comparatively low damage to us, so it's still much better to charge it up yourself. There are some enemies that can do decent damage, but as you will see right now, if you just shoot it a little bit, even with the Leto Vando, the damage is going to be considerably higher. So let's move on to Nyx's Pacifying Bolts, which is an augment for psychic bolts, which would previously confuse enemies struck by the bolts for 10 seconds. And while this is still the case, so any enemy hit by the bolts will flail around for 10 seconds in panic, which is very nice, it will now also fire 3 additional bolts, so it will affect more enemies. This is actually pretty good because the base ability strips away enemy armor and it scales with power strain, so you can strip away a ton of the enemy armor and lock them in place at the same time. After that, we have Partitioned Mallet for Octavia's Mallet. This would previously give you 2 mallets, but it would reduce their range by 50%. This has now been changed to only reduce the range by 20%. I don't think I have to tell you why this one is better, it simply allows you to cover much more space with her mallets, which is very good. And we are slowly nearing the end with Revenant's Blinding Reef, which previously would make it so that you blind any enemy you hit while passing through them with Reef for 10 seconds. And while that is still the case, you will also now get 40% free power range for Reef, which is a nice bonus, I suppose. It's not too big though. After that, we have Rhinos Reinforcing Stomp, which is of course an augment for Stomp, which would previously restore 80 health to your Iron Skin whenever you would hit an enemy by Stomp. This has now been changed to instead restore 4% of your Iron Skin per enemy hit, which is going to be worse at very low levels when you don't have a ton of health on your Iron Skin, but once you get a decent build and you have decent to high levels of Iron Skin, it is going to be considerably better. And the second one for Rhino is actually Piercing Roar, which would previously make it so that whenever you would roar, it would knock down all enemies within 25 meters of you and hit them with a puncture status effect, but also allow you to recast Roar while it was already active. And while once again the functionality of the augment remains the same, so you knock all enemies down and you proc puncture on them and you can recast Roar, you will also now get 40% free power range for Roar from this. And finally, we have Oberon's Hallowed Reckoning, which is a Reckoning augment. Now, this would previously make it so that whenever you would hit an enemy with Reckoning, they would emit a 2-meter area wherever they landed that would increase your and nearby allies' armor by 250% and do 150 damage per second to all enemies that were stood in it. Whereas now, the area they emit whenever they slam into the ground is going to be 3 meters rather than 2, and the damage has been doubled from 150 to 300. Plus, as a little bonus, you gain 40% extra range for Reckoning. And that is it for all the Warframe Augment buffs from update 32. I thank you very much for watching as always, guys. Let me know what you think about these augment buffs in the comment section down below. I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.